to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the managing director at Sino Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Good afternoon, Lei. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 101, the last episode of the Year of the Tiger. And we can take it easy.
For a week.
Let's start.
We get a week off.
we get our annual
We're like a
week
Chinese
off.
restaurant. We're like a Chinese restaurant. Always working.
Yeah. So let's start out by talking about the economy, some of the sights and sounds from Davos.
Okay.
We heard Vice Premier Liu He kind of gave his opinion on views on where China is going. We heard about the population drop, very significant, I think, for implications for longer term car sales, NEV sales even. And policy-wise, there's been some chatter about supportive policies to come. It's very vague, but maybe we combine those and kind of look at our crystal ball on what might happen in 2023.
Let's be clear. Supportive policies means that He Xiaopeng, Li Ben, Li Xiang, all those guys, Li Shufu, Wang Chuanfu, they're lobbying to get help from the Chinese government for 2023. So let's be clear about that.
And the help, the so-called help, is not equivalent for everybody, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Some needs more than others. I don't know if BYD needs help at all, to tell you the truth.
Well, it's for BYD, it's as much about losing momentum as it is, or it's more so about losing general momentum than it is about competition or needing some subsidies or some sort of push, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have their targets. I mean, it's difficult to double against last year's already high 1.8, 1.9 million units.
Right.
But that's their goal, right? Anything less than that would be a failure.
So if I am correct, they have close to 3.5 million units of capacity that is
Roughly.
Available for them. Yes, roughly, 差不多.
Let's let's move away from the auto market for a moment and really look at the economy. 3% GDP growth, and then population drop for the first time in 61 years.
By 850,000 people.
Yeah, and that could continue in the years to come. So we already know that India is already number one now, I guess.
It will be, well, officially it will be by the end of this year, but I believe it's already number one.
Yeah, and if we look at the State Information Office, they've been holding press conferences the last 2 days. So we had the MIT officials speak, we had the Ministry of Commerce officials speak, and both pointed to the auto sector as a pillar of the economy, and they are studying the so-called, what kind of supportive policies that would come out.
Yes.
To support consumption, really the consumption, not NEVs, but just, consumption of vehicles overall.
So if I'm guessing, Lei, there's likely 45, 50 million units of capacity in China for automotive manufacturing. And if you include up the supply chain, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, there's probably hundreds of millions of jobs that the automotive sector employs.
Yes. The rough rule of thumb is you just double the industry production and sales. That's the capacity, roughly. So, but I think it's really refreshing to see, at least from you and from my side, if you look at our WeChat moments, people are traveling. People are going back home. It's
unleashed,
hustling and bustling again. And we have not seen that in 3 years.
And
so at least
no more complaints about COVID, no more horror stories. Everyone's much more hopeful. So
that's the word. That it's more hopeful and it's great to see. I mean, and what Liu He said, at least what he's trying to get across, doubles that we'll be back to normal growth.
And
again.
And part of the Chinese government's job is to try to stimulate growth by creating policies that will encourage all the trillions of RMB that have been on the sidelines for the last 3 years to be consumed in China. Okay?
Right. And this, again, if we look into the crystal ball, this is one of those things where do people consume once China opens? Would this be a negative for car sales? It could.
I think with nothing being done, it will be, because I know a lot of people that are traveling abroad.
Right. It feels like half the people you see on Moments, they're already outside of where they live. They're already on vacation mode.
This being the anomaly because it's Chinese New Year, so they're going to their hometown.
Yeah, and
I can't believe it's Chinese New Year. It
was just New Year, like yesterday, it felt like, and now it's Chinese New Year next Monday. So
I got to tell you a funny story. So being old, when I was young, I used to live for New Year's, because I would go and party and go to a club. For 9 years straight, I was in a different country celebrating New Year's.
Jeez.
Now that I'm old and have kids, I feel like New Year's Eve is like nothing, but Chinese New Year, I always really look forward to it, because got to roll and wrap some dumplings, got to boil them, got to hang out with some really cool people that I considered my family. And so this is, I can feel your challenge, Lei, over the last couple of years, because here at least it's hard to find longevity noodles. It's hard to find a dumpling place. It's hard to find a place to have decent Chinese food. And for my wife, it's really big deal. And
it is. And
so
we've been keeping the tradition. So to give you a example, today is the 28th of the lunar,
right.
Well, not the new year, but the 28th of the last month of the lunar year. And the tradition is to make mantos, Chinese buns.
Yep.
And my wife is doing that right now.
Okay.
The flour is being prepared, and which means when the flour expands, it means fa means to make money.
Right. There's a lot of symbolism, and I think what's important for Westerners to understand who don't have a deep understanding of Chinese New Year. So I'm Vietnamese, but we celebrate Chinese New Year, the lunar New Year.
Yeah.
And it's actually a week. So it's Spring Festival. And so although it's a day, Chinese New Year, it's a week. And when I first moved to Beijing, Lei, I would drive with my wife to her grandparents' home in North Third Ring.
Yes.
For Chinese New Year's Eve, we would watch that CCTV show.
Same here.
And when we drove back at 12:31 a.m., it was a war zone, because everybody had fireworks all over the street. And you had to have, remember in 2008 and 2009, all that stuff? And people were staying up all night with boxes full of fireworks. And it was on Third Ring Road. People were on Third Ring Road firing off fireworks. And I had to avoid them in my car. And that's all changed. They pushed it out past Sixth Ring Road, right? But
you can bet this year people will be wanting to burn off some of those fireworks any way they can, just to, right?
Yeah.
Kick the bad luck of the last 3 years out of the way, right?
And I feel hopeful as well for them
Yeah,
because I was part of the community for so long that
yeah,
your emotions get tied to a lot of the things that are
yeah.
happening. So
So I think we can at least, we don't know the exact policies, but I imagine, first of all, this price war brewing. It's already, the dominoes have fallen. And then it's just a matter of incentivizing the purchase of NEVs, not through subsidies, but
through competition.
through use, through maybe, I was thinking, incentives to for you to maybe trade in your older vehicle, things like that. So
Here's an ominous number that should freak people out about 2022. And I had written this in my just sent newsletter. 81% of all EV sales, so not NEV, EV sales in China in
yes,
2022 were bought from Chinese domestic EV makers.
basically 80/20. That's the
4 or 5.
yeah, yeah,
Staggering number.
yeah. So 80/20 Chinese foreign share basically in the NEV, and most of those foreign are Tesla.
Yeah,
And we can move
because
on
they're not
to
Volkswagen.
right. Well, Volkswagen is relatively better among the foreign
Yeah,
camp.
sure.
But we move on to this price cut, and who's next? Who do you think is the next to give in?
Well, I think there's a bunch of SOEs that we don't track that closely that are probably going to shave some pricing.
ID, Mustang, Mach-E, these type of
I don't think there's any question that the foreign automakers.
200,000, 300,000 RMB range, which is very painful. The thing is, I think Tesla has the pricing power and the cost competitiveness and the capacity. Once you drop prices, when the demand goes up, you can produce. It's not something everybody else can do, at least for the short term.
This is the thing. I hope that Tesla management doesn't believe they can raise prices
Well,
when it gets a little bit better, because I just don't see that ability unless they add new features or change the vehicle or the product substantially or enough so that people feel value in order to pay more for a Model 3 or a Model Y.
yeah, the only way it's gonna go is even lower.
Yes. At least in 23.
Yeah, so look for, this is a, I don't know if you've made this prediction, but look for a Tesla model below renminbi 200,000 at some point this year. We'll just say that.
Remember when we first started this podcast, I told you that I could see Tesla selling eventually close to cost and selling services to make up for that difference. And so I thought we were still years away from that. But man, because at the end of the day, their long-term play is services and data. And so the capacity thing and the manufacturing thing, it's kind of a nuisance, but in order to get to most of those vehicles out on the road, in order to sell them services, and Tesla's the closest to actually making that a business model, because I've spoken with some executives here now, U.S. legacies, and I don't get the warm and fuzzy that they know what they're doing yet, and they don't. We see that, right? They're experimenting. They're not. I think they've learned from BMW that you don't turn around and sell heated seats when we're part of the vehicle a day before, but they're racking their brains and they're looking at startups and they're trying to transform everything, but the mindset is still, the box that they're playing in is still the automotive box. So they just need to get completely out of that automotive box because they can't think straight otherwise. So
Yeah.
So let's go over, Lei. Ito, Xpeng, Tesla has reduced pricing, right? Xpeng
Yep.
substantially. So
Yeah, but I mean, they have to get that out because they're launching the updated P7, right? And look what they reduced prices on the P7, right?
I could also see like Geometry, Geely, Lynk & Co. also kind of reducing prices as well.
Yeah.
Stable of Geely brands.
I don't know. We'll see what BYD does, because BYD raised prices. One of the
Yeah.
first ones to announce that they would, raise prices. Not by a lot, but so one thing
But
to look forward to.
But I feel that holding firm on price is almost like, it's almost like cutting price a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know.
right. And I think one thing to look forward to is what Tesla will announce on the Investor Day, any upcoming new models or refreshed models for either China or the US market, right? That's something to look forward to.
I hope that more analysts really dig deep into Tesla's global footprint as opposed to what they're doing in Europe and the United States only, because to me, the China market is linchpin. It's 1.2 million units of capacity for them. And in order for them to get anywhere close to 20 million vehicles sold a year, China's probably going to have to be 35% of that, I would think. So,
yeah. So moving on to Faraday Future, finding a new home.
I have no idea what they did. I'm clueless. I read it and I was like, Ting Badong.
I hear you.
So
I'm Ting Dong as well.
So Ting Badong means I don't understand. So
yeah, see, they have this setup, right? They have this FFIE, which is the actual EV company. They have this FF Top, which is a subsidiary of FF Global Partners, which is made up of their management.
Yes.
At least, from the presser. And Huanggang is picking up the pieces left over by WM Motor.
I've never been to Huanggang. Have you been to Huanggang? I've never even heard of it.
No.
It's probably some tier 4 city with 5 million people in it, right?
And I think it's really the local government with this asset finding somebody to work together. And it so happened that Faraday Future needs this.
I think it's important to explain that the provincial leaders, they're Communist Party members. And in order to show and get promoted, they need to show economic development.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
That's why these deals get inked, because they want to show to their leadership, but also to other corporations that, hey, we're building something here. Why don't you come along?
It's important to mention this because a few days ago, there was a huge saga of this company called Lading. You must have heard about it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It became national news, not only in the EV or within the auto industry. It became like national headline, because of what this founder put up in a video saying that the local leader of the local county basically asked the company to artificially report profit by 4 billion renminbi or something to make them look good. And he was looking for money, and he's saying, this official is not helping, and there's all kinds of back and forth,
Yes.
He said, she said. This is one of there's many Latins, there's many FFs.
So many.
Yeah. That
This to me reminds me of what Freeman did with WM and that Apollo. I think it's
exactly this.
To me. So when I worked in finance, we would say it's the same pants. It's just a different pair of pockets or different pockets. So meaning that it's still the same company, right? And we do know that in the United States they are very, very, very low on capital. Although they say they're going to make job one by March, I don't see that happening. So,
well, their plan is interesting. They worded start of production at the end of March, with the first ones rolling off the lines in early April, which is like, what do you mean? SOP is SOP. How can you spin that?
And if I were a buyer looking at a $150,000 vehicle, I would make sure that spec sheet has the latest technology, because that car is like 5 years old now.
It's
So
$180,000, I believe.
yeah, 180. Sorry.
Right. So I was at CES and actually sat in it, and there's this guy in the driver's seat showing people off, and yeah, it was interesting to see always piggybacking at CES in the future on yeah. These companies they're just getting life support, but they're not leaving the bed, right? They're not leaving that hospital bed.
The funny thing is in LA, there are so many Faraday Byton alums that have gone on to other startups or battery startups, or it's kind of a badge of honor almost that you spent some time at a Byton or a Neo in Southern California or even Silicon Valley, right? So, oh man, one of my predictions was Faraday's finally going to close its doors in 2023. That was one of my bolder ones. That was one of my bolder predictions.
Yeah. They've had what, 99 lives, 98 lives, one more left or something.
Yeah, well, and see, this is the other part. YT is still pulling the strings. So whether they're successful or not, it's completely, you can give him the credit or you can give him the blame. So that's how I see it.
And speaking, this so Faraday Future was exhibiting at a LiDAR supplier, Innovusion, which supplies Neo. And in the LiDAR, very big news was Hesai filing papers for US IPO on NASDAQ. So I think there's this Chinese saying called, there's a tiger in the mountain, but there's a tiger in the mountain, but you're still, you know that Chinese saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're still going up the mountain. I think this is what Hesai is doing, and like many probably other ones that are planning to IPO. And
I think the United States is still the most liquid market in the world, capital market in the world. So,
but it was so interesting to read some of the stuff that they showed in the prospectus. I mean, he's David Lee. I mean, one of the founders. The three founders are only in their 30s. I mean, they've only been out of college for, let's say, a decade at most. And they started out as a laser sensor provider for natural gas industry.
Yeah.
And then pivoted to mechanical LiDARs for robotaxis. And then pivoted again to these so-called hybrid solid-state LiDARs for passenger vehicles. So some of their customers, Li Auto, right? Jidu, Lotus, to name a few.
Yeah, the LiDAR space is going to be, it's going to be brutal in China, so it's going to be even more brutal for non-Chinese companies.
One of the interesting things I didn't share in 2 episodes ago in the CES recap was that I was at Hesai's booth, and over there I saw the founder David speaking to the founder of Innovusion. And along with Tony Hine of WeRide, which uses Hesai's LiDARs, what they discussing? They were discussing who was truly the number one Chinese LiDAR last year in terms of production and delivery, and they had some debates and disagreements, and finally they agreed that Innovusion, in terms of the final insurance registration of passenger EVs with LiDARs, was the number one. But Hesai, in terms of overall, including other mechanical LiDARs, was the number one. So that was an interesting exchange.
Well, and when I visited WeRide in 2019, right before COVID, I talked to Li Zhang, who's the COO. He was the COO. I think he's even higher now, but he effectively told me that they were swapping everything over to Chinese suppliers because they were using Velodyne prior to. So
exactly. And speaking of WeRide, they just announced a strategic cooperation with Horizon Robotics just today. And guess what? I saw Tony speaking with one of the VPs of Horizon Robotics at CES. So I'm like, okay, they must have been talking about this deal back then.
Yeah.
And now it's finalized.
There's a lot of pressure on Horizon to perform. So they're not going to be able to compete in the next 5, 6, 7 years with an NVIDIA. So
Yeah.
their clients or customers see progress. Is that going to be enough to stay with them? Because what Horizon is doing is they're sending samples to these customers and these clients, and they're testing them. And if they're able to, the system on chip that Horizon is fabbing, if it's able to compete with the Qualcomms and the NVIDIAs, maybe they'll swap over, but there's no guarantee of that. And it only guarantees Horizon, if they have an acceptable chip, to be the China supplier for the chip, not the rest of the world supplier. So I think that's important. Yeah. And, Volkswagen's strategy is bifurcated by saying Qualcomm, rest of the world, Horizon, China. So
yeah. And you saw that Herbert D's posting a selfie with the
I saw
Yukai,
that.
right, on LinkedIn. I wrote something about that deal being the blockbuster deal that we voted. And then I guess the CATL, a few were the news. One is the NEO 5-year new strategic deal, new projects and products in the next 5 years. And then they also announced this CICC factory in Yichun.
Yeah.
I think which is very important because this is their cell to chassis assembly line.
This is where you just see the foreign tier ones and the legacies becoming much more irrelevant in the China market, right?
Less irrelevant.
Yeah, and because you're not seeing a ton of announcements coming out of a Bosch, coming out of a Conti, so.
But then again, I repeat what I said, 2 episodes ago, is NEO's steer-by-wire from ZF starting in 2025 on their next set of new models.
Yeah.
Right? So these are some things still where the tier ones play a role. But other than that, I think I'm good. I wanted to share a couple of numbers, which I thought was very significant from the MIIT guy in the press conference. He said China had 5.21 million EV charging piles at the end of 2022, and 2.593 million were added in 2022 alone. If I'm not, if there was no typo, okay? But I was like, I think the U.S. wants to build 150,000 charging stations by whichever year, and China has 2.5 million.
Let's be clear. Charging piles aren't charging stations, right?
Charging piles I understand that. So. Sure. But still, it's just a unfathomable number.
Yes.
That are built in 1 year.
Well, so China had made that requirement for any new building that had a parking structure, 20%.
Right.
Yeah, 20% had to have charging capabilities. And so that's why the charging piles versus the charging stations, right?
Yeah.
But that's, you know my story, man. I live in a mid-rise. It's a building with 8 floors in Troy, Michigan, that was built less than 5 or 6 years ago. In the parking lot, in the retail parking lot, there are no charging stations. In the parking structure attached to my apartment, there are no charging stations.
Jeez.
So, and this is Troy, Michigan, which is about 8 miles from the Warren Tech Center, GM headquarters, and about 8 or 9 miles from Stellantis, not FCA, but Chrysler headquarters in Auburn Hills. So we're not in the boonies, and we're 18 miles from Detroit proper. So we are way, way behind. California is the bogey that the rest of the United States needs to emulate. But even then, even with an increased number of charging piles, unless there's some maintenance program, there's some sort of automatic check and balance to make sure that the charging stations are in working order. And not only in working order to be able to be charged, but to be able to use your credit card or whatever in order to pay for charging, because I've been told that sometimes credit cards don't get taken. And so even if it looks like it's working, you still have payment issues. And so the CX on charging in the United States is horrible. So horrible.
Yeah, and you know, back to the China NEV sales. This is where customers are already buying these NEVs not for the subsidies, but for the fact that they're becoming household items.
Yeah.
You don't have this kind of worry that you just described anymore, at least not compared to years before. So with the understanding that the infrastructure is there.
Yeah. And here's a funny story. So I'm in a ton of car guy group chats and WeChat, and a few of the guys are high-end car enthusiasts, and they're like, man, I need to buy my high-priced exotic now, because when EVs take over, the price of the Ferrari blah 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 Tributo is going to go 3, 4, or 5x. And I'm just like, holy shit, dude. How funny, because like Ferraris on the used car market in China are just ridiculously priced. I saw one for $800,000, and it's just like, so yeah. I one thing that I did want to also mention is that we had talked about our forecast. I'm quoted, or I've predicted over 9. I think you're around 9. CPCA guy predicted 8.6, I think. And yeah, anyways.
What we need to stress is when we talk about these NEV sales, we talked about this last episode. There's 2 different numbers we must make clear is the CAAM numbers, the 6.8, 6.9 million, includes export and inventory, not the final
shipped, sell through,
end user sales,
right,
or registered. So that number last year was 5.35 registered from the Ministry of Public Security. So when we talk about these forecasted numbers, we need to point out what they actually mean. So for me, when I say 2023, 10 million, my prediction, it includes export. But domestic, it probably will not reach 10 million. Based on the 5.35 million number, right? 30, 40% growth, 50% growth. You're not going to get to 10 million. So we need to point that out.
And so for the export, I still think BYD and Tesla are going to throw out the lion's share on the percentage wise that way. I believe BYD is looking at 300,000 in exports for next year.
So roughly 10% of their total expected.
Yes. So huge number. I would think a lot of that is going to end up in Europe.
They just shipped 10,000 units to Thailand, was it? Mm-hmm. Out of 3.
And so if there's competition and a lot of pressure to continue in China in 2023, you can expect that export number to bulge as the Chinese automakers look for ways to still sell product, because the competition is higher and more intense in China. They'll look to export to be that pressure release valve in order to keep utilization rates high. So
I mean, last year, total export of NEVs was around 700,000 units. So this year, we would expect at least 1 million.
Without question. And a good portion of those going to Europe. So, but not from Tesla.
Well, Tesla is still, I mean, if you look at some of the numbers being reported, there was several days in a row where there was more than 10,000 units sold per day, if I heard it right or if I read it correctly.
You're talking about Tesla, right?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, right? I mean, we're talking about 10K per day, and these startups are doing 10K a month.
That is going to wear those people, that's going to wear away pretty quickly, right? So, and think of it this way. I don't know if they're going to double sales, let's say, for instance, they cut prices 2 or 3 times this year and sales increases significantly, does that put a lot of pressure on their charging infrastructure? Or, I don't know what the ratio should be, and so it could actually increase customer complaints. It could increase customer dissatisfaction because of so many different things, right? So I think they also have to be careful about that as well, because we know that over the last couple of years before last year, they had prioritized growth over customer engagement. And so I don't believe that they addressed customer satisfaction in 2022 either. So
that's why we say that these price cuts, Tesla needs to be careful, where in the longer term, it might bite back in some ways. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
In the short term, they're still...
Yeah, they're king until they're not, right?
Right, they're still the king. I mean, people have to watch what Tesla does to really, dictate it. Their actions are really dictated by what Tesla does still.
So, anything else?
That's all from, I think, the news cycle is dying down a little bit in China.
Yes.
All I see is these companies putting out digital branded red pockets for WeChat.
And there's going to be a lot of gifts being sent. So Kuai and stuff like that. So let me throw a couple stats out, but I also want to open the room up. It is 3:45. So for anyone who has any questions or comments, please raise your hand. We'll pull you up and let you ask your question. I think it's important to also note that last year, 10% globally of all vehicles sold were electric in all over the world. So that take rate in China was 19%. It ended up around 19% lay. Germany was 25%. And the US went from 3.2 in 2021 to 5.8 in 2022. So important increases. The total global sales volume was about 80 million units. Okay. And for the United States, we actually shrank. So the only company that grew at all really was GM in the United States market. So everybody else kind of shrank, but NEVs were the good news, of course. And the other thing that I think is important is that your guys at Volvo are building a minivan. And I'm hoping that it's not going to be a reskinned Zeekr 009. I hope they can do better than that. The last thing, and I think you'd mentioned it in the tweet, was that DD is back.
Right. And then, since you mentioned DD, about that strong national transport app.
Yeah, what is that?
It turns out that the Ministry of Transport has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
It's not endorsed by the Ministry of Transport.
Can you explain to people what it is?
It looks like there's been some newer reports that this is a company based out of Beijing that were started out by 2 reporters.
Okay.
It's some kind of an information technology company. There's still not a final say whether this is a legitimate app that will actually be launched. But the story is that it seemed that the Ministry of Transport had endorsed this.
Well, it was probably premature for them to do that.
To aggregate different ride-hailing, cargo transport, delivery platforms. But it looks like it's to be decided.
It made too much sense, and so they backed away.
Yeah, but DD, that was,
18 months of detention.
July 2021 was when they were kind of told to back down, right? So
basically a week after IPO.
Yeah.
And I still have a few friends that are paying for it because they thought that DD was a sure thing. And so they're like, do you think I should invest? And I'm like, dude, I'm not your financial advisor, but I think there could be some troubles. And then next thing you know, they get thrown in the box, and my buddy's like, man, I should listen to you. I'm like, I'm not a financial advisor, but I think it's going to be really hard for them to turn around and get to that level of significance again. I still think it's a very, very relevant app in China. And I still have a bunch of friends that use it. But man, I'm surprised no one got thrown in jail. I'm surprised that Cheng Wei
and Jin Liu, they've been awfully quiet the last months, if not years.
Oh man, they've been like Jack Ma quiet.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's really all I had as well. So
and just one more thing, Auto Shanghai is less than 3 months away. I can't believe it.
Oh man. Yeah, I was kind of looking at my calendar for this year, and there's like 2 or 3 international shows that I want to go to. Some of them aren't completely about automobiles, so we're already January's almost over, man. So
it's almost, because just time flies.
And yeah, so that is all I had. If no one has any questions, I guess we can close up the room. And you do the housekeeping because next week we're not on, right?
Well, next week we have a break. So the next live episode will be on February 2nd, which we will see the January numbers by then. And it's supposed to be not good, but Tesla might be a different story based on the price cuts.
The Chinese government is going to look very closely at these numbers, I think. So,
yeah,
because it'll determine whether or not it's a binary decision, but not only binary, but the degree of help that the automotive sector might need. So, and let's be clear, Lei, the current 10% sales tax waiver is gone, right? And the subsidies, the
10% is still in place.
Oh, it's still in place. Okay.
Right, for NEVs. That's still in place.
For NEVs though now, right?
Just for NEVs.
But right. the waiver for all vehicle sales is gone.
That's gone, right? That was only the second half of 2022.
Right. Okay. So, and the subsidies, they're still there but got smaller, or they're completely gone now?
Gone. They're gone.
They're gone.
No more.
Okay. That's what I thought too. All right, man. So no more questions. So why don't we close up shop? Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and please have a happy and safe Chinese New Year. 新年快乐，新年快乐.
Same to you. It's been certainly a tigerish year. Hopefully, we're looking at a more toned down, rabbitish.
Yes, the year of the Tutsi. The year of the Tutsi.
So
cool, man.
All right.
I'll catch you on WeChat, dude.
Okay.
See ya.
Yeah, catch you in the new year. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.